It enabled us as a company to focus on what mattered most. The result of that, I believe, is a more meaningful level of engagement, not only with each other in terms of the person sitting next to me, but through the organization in general, because we had a rallying cry when all this was happening, that no one would be left behind.
Hello, I'm Noelle Lim on ASEAN Speaks by Maybank Investment Banking Group. Nickel prices have been soaring, trading at an 11-year high due to a supply crunch and strong demand for electrical vehicle (EV) batteries, and more recently on the back of speculation that sanctions might be imposed on Russia, a nickel-producing country. I speak to Danny Zamora, the president of Nickel Asia Corporation Philippines, a company founded by his father to become one of the largest nickel-producing companies in the world. It was truly a baptism of fire for Dennis, who took over the running of Nickel Asia in 2019, just when Typhoon Kamuri swept through the Philippines and then came the COVID-19 pandemic. Dennis talks to us about his vision as a second-generation leader of the company. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start with nickel prices. Why is there a deficit in nickel supply?
There's a real drop in inventory in the LME and Shanghai nickel exchanges. There was a deficit in 2021 of about 160,000 tons of nickel. So this is a very surprising development because the analysts were previously forecasting a surplus of roughly 50,000 tons. So what happened there is that it was mainly COVID related. So there were supply disruptions. And as an example, Indonesia produced 100,000 tons less than expected by analysts. That's what's happening on the supply side. On the demand side, there was also surprise in terms of the strong performance of the stainless steel and the EV sectors. So the stainless steel sector grew by 14% in 2021, while the sales of electric vehicles, both passenger and commercial, increased by over 100%. So both demand and supply led to the squeeze.
What is the likelihood of double ordering, customers placing duplicate orders to ensure they could get supplies?
I'm not aware of that of double orders. Let's talk about the decline in the nickel exchanges in Shanghai and LME. It's due to genuine fear that they will not have enough nickel to use as raw material for their short-term production. So I don't think it's double ordering. On top of that, perhaps you have situations where people are speculating, so buying from the LME and hoping that prices will go up. Our view is that it's caused by real demand due to the growth in EV production and real fear that there will be not enough nickel units to supply them in the near term.
How much do EVs account for demand for nickel?
Okay, so in 2021, the battery segment, so this is not just EVs, but all batteries, consumed about 320,000 tons of nickel. So that accounted for about 11% of nickel demand. Just to give you a little more flavor on that, this is due to 6.5 million passenger and commercial vehicles, electric vehicles sold last year, which was double the number than the previous year.
The market share of EVs as a percentage of total passenger car market is still very small, and analysts are bullish about its growth. You're projecting there will be a deficit of nickel supply unless more new projects are developed. Why aren't there more supply coming on stream despite the prospect of responsible mining?
There's a lot of issues to discuss there, particularly with respect to supply for EVs. To supply EVs, the analysts are forecasting that for this decade, so from 2020 to 2030, over 1 million tons of additional nickel is needed. So that's in addition to what is being consumed today. So to supply that, you need class 1 nickel. And the intermediate product for class 1 nickel will mainly come from high pressure acid leach production. That is the intermediate product. They produce the intermediate product, which is called a nickel sulfide product, which is further processed to class 1 nickel. So what we know today is that HPAL development will majority will have to come from Indonesia. And the issue there is that number one, is there enough resource in Indonesia to support what is needed? And so, in fact, analysts are forecasting that Indonesian HPAL capacity, there will be a total of 300,000 tons produced by 2025. A million tons needed for this decade, but only 300,000 tons of capacity forecasted by 2025. And to compound matters, of this 300,000, only 170,000 are currently underway. So this 300,000 by itself is highly speculative. And in addition to this, there are no recent announcement of new projects. To answer your question, why no additional supply is being produced? Number one, as I said, is the resources in Indonesia. Is there enough for that? And then for other types of nickel. Number two is the very high capex needed. It is in the billions of dollars to develop an HPAL plant. And number three, it's technically very risky. A lot of HPAL plants have failed or ramped up instead of the planned ramp up period, maybe 5 or even 10 years later, they're still not at plant capacity. So our view, and I think this is a view shared by many analysts, is that nickel has to be above $20,000 per ton at a sustained level to induce more HPAL development. Indonesia is the focus of the community today, and there are no expectations of additional sources of nickel especially for HPAL and EVs outside of Indonesia. It's not even being discussed, those other areas.
So, are you expecting that prices would stabilize above 20K?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't expect prices to stabilize because prices will have to go up. What I do expect is that prices will not go below $20,000 in the near term.
What is the likelihood of using alternatives to nickel sulfates for EV car batteries?
It's actually being done today with companies like Tesla and other companies in China. So they are using, for example, a product called LFP, which is a lithium iron phosphate. So this does not contain any nickel. The analysts are forecasting that this will have a market share of roughly 20%, but the majority of batteries will still be from nickel-rich types, so the NMA or the NMC. And the reason is, as of today, you really need nickel. It is desirable to have nickel because of the smaller size of the battery and the longer range, and safety is an aspect as well. So my view is that there will be room for other technologies, such as the LFP that I mentioned, or maybe hydrogen fuel cell. But these will be responses due to the lack of nickel. There's room for this technology just because there's not enough nickel to supply the whole market.
So,
It's not because it's a superior or cheaper product.
what are you looking out for in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that has sent nickel prices soaring?
A lot of nickel is produced in Russia. And one of the biggest nickel producers is a company called Norilsk Nickel, which is a Russian company. So the potential effect of that is if Russian companies are for some reason prevented from selling outside of Russia. And so that's the I guess that's one of the things being discussed. But whether that will happen or not, I cannot even venture a guess. Well, the other is oil price, which will have an inflationary effect and will affect the prices of commodities. Those are the things that I can think about.
So let's talk about NAC. Talk to us about your vision for the company, for the group.
Better to give a bit of a background. So NAC is the combination of 4 operating nickel mines which was founded 50 years ago. Our first shipment was from our Rio Tuba mine in 1977. And since then, the company has been profitable, but more importantly, we have been well known for what we do for communities and our people and the environment. So we have won all the major local and even international awards. Just to give an example, we won the ASEAN Mineral Awards in 2017. So this is with the Rio Tuba mine, and we competed with other regional players. And as well, we won the Presidential Mineral Industry Environment Award, which is awarded by the President of the Philippines. And all our mines, all four of our mines, have won this award many times over. Even before the term ESG was a catchphrase, it was already, part of the DNA of the company, and we have been recognized for this. Moving forward, in the as the pandemic happened in 2020 and 21, I asked the management team to join me in revisiting our vision to chart a path forward. So the result was a new vision statement that number one acknowledges our role to sustainable national development. So going beyond our localities. And then our adoption of an ESG roadmap that will help us even increase the high standards that we already have in the utilization of our natural resources. We were able to craft what we call our One NAC vision. So the One NAC vision has two goals. One is to, by 2025, to be one of the Philippine Stock Exchange's top 25 listed companies. So we do want to be part of the PSE index as a result. And number two, to be acknowledged as a leading ESG investment in the Philippines, which may surprise some because ESG and mining, are not normally, spoken in the same sentence because of our history and because of what we do to real people and real communities. It's a theme that we want to push forward to our investors. Finally, to achieve this vision of the One NAC vision and our principles, NAC intends to remain a stable dividend-paying business through our best-in-class mining operations. And at the same time, we want to broaden our horizons through our foray into renewable energy, through our subsidiary called Emerging Power Inc.
When do you expect the group will reach a point where renewable energy can replace the nickel business?
Okay, so the answer to that is not soon. Just to give you some perspective, Nickel Asia had a net income of over 6 billion pesos as of the third quarter of 2021. So our immediate goal right now is to build about 650 megawatts of renewable power by 2025, and then 2 or 3 years later reach 1 gigawatt. So at 1 gigawatt, we forecast a net income, assuming a price of 4.5 pesos per kilowatt hour. We expect to generate net income of about 1.4 to 1.8 billion pesos. Relative to our mining income, that would be the proportion for renewable energy if things go according to our plan. Obviously, what will change this share is two things. One is we may be wrong with our price assumption of 4.5 kilowatt pesos per kilowatt hour. And indeed, the market factors favor an increase, point to an increase in power prices in the Philippines. So that is possible. The second aspect that could change things is the increase in our target capacity, but it is possible that we will upgrade this perhaps to even 3 gigawatts if our plans materialize. Because we are currently in discussions with a large international player to do a joint venture in the Philippines. So that's a possibility. Maybe the share will be higher because of those two things, but I really should not speculate on that.
Part of the plan is to be a contributor to sustainable national development. And that seems to me, at least from my point of view, makes sense because you really have to generate massive carbon credits
Yeah.
to offset the impact of mining. So, could you
Mhm.
give us an idea? What do you mean by sustainable national development?
Contrary to common belief, the carbon footprint of mining is not that negative. First of all, we do not utilize too much electricity. The main contributors to carbon emissions would be the use of fuel in our equipment, and maybe what is being publicized is that we have to cut trees to mine. We actually are required to replant 100 trees for every tree that we disturb. The actual, circumstance or fact right now is that we're actually a carbon sink. Mining is actually a carbon sink, at least our mining. To top that off, we are going big time into renewable energy, and you that adds to that figure. That's not what I'm thinking of in terms of our contribution to national development. What we're thinking of is more in the lines of being responsible taxpayers, following strict environmental standards, and even exceeding these, being targeting our CSR programs not just for the development of our own people and local communities, taking a look at causes that have benefit for the wider community and the Philippines in general. Those are a bit general, what I've just told you. That's because this year, 2022, is a baselining year for us. So we're going to measure our carbon our carbon, whether we are a carbon sink. We're going to put those into figures. We're going to analyze what are the causes in terms of ESG that we want to strive for that will have actual positive impact that matter to the local and the national areas. So after this year, starting 2023, we will implement that, and we will be transparent about our goals and performance to the public.
Nickel Asia has approved a pipeline of 1 gigawatt, as what you
Yes.
mentioned. Give us a sense of how much this will power the Philippines, like how many homes will be, for example, be powered.
Sure. Sure. So we're talking about solar here, right? So 1 gigawatt of solar is, you have to assume a plant factor of roughly 25%. So given that plant factor, you will produce about 2.1 million megawatt hours per year. So I did some research, and the per capita household consumption in the Philippines is about 250 kilowatt hours per year. So if you divide these figures, it means that you will supply power to roughly 8 million homes or 40 million people. And by the way, 1 gigawatt of solar has the carbon impact of removing emissions of about 15 million combustion engine cars. You're better off with solar and geothermal than you are not with than if you didn't have it. But we don't have these figures on hand at the moment, as this year is a baselining year, and we will come forward with those figures for the public to see by next year.
Are there no more land to be mined in the Philippines for nickel?
I guess there's a few more, but based on our knowledge, most, if not all, of the nickel areas are already permitted, are already being utilized. There would be not too many. I would say maybe two or three untapped projects in the Philippines, but nothing that would really change the supply demand situations drastically.
Do you plan to stay on in the Philippines or venture out to ASEAN and possibly to which
Okay.
country?
So definitely for geothermal, we intend to stay in the Philippines. And for solar, while we are not looking at anything in particular, it's something that is of interest to us to see what's out there regionally. So maybe with a joint venture partner that is a foreign partner, that could help that process.
What about the nickel business? Are there plans to venture out beyond Philippines?
Not at the moment. We've been very busy on the upstream side of the development. And that's because most of the our expertise and actually the profit at today's market is generated on the upstream. So what would be of interest to us, maybe in the medium to long term, would be to take a look at downstream opportunities. That's something that we have to take a careful look at because it is not in our area of competence to go overseas and to do downstream. So we have to take careful consideration of this.
Perhaps to only take small stakes in, say, downstream companies, say in China, for example?
Sure, sure. That is definitely something that we discuss, but no specific opportunities yet. We are monitoring what is happening in particular to China and Indonesia and even Japan.
So, taking over the leadership of Nickel Asia since last year from your father, what has been the experience so far?
It's probably been the most unexpected and rewarding experience because I took over in the latter part of 2019, and the first thing that faced me was there was a volcano eruption right after I took the reins. And then just two months later, COVID arrived, and we had our first lockdown. And we are famous for having one of the longest lockdowns in the world. So if you can imagine that was a very rough and interesting start for me. But looking back, it was, I think, the best possible time for me and the company because it enabled us as a company to focus on what mattered most to ourselves, not just individually, but also as members of a team and company. And the result of that, I believe, is a more meaningful level of engagement, not only with each other in terms of the person sitting next to me, but through the organization in general, because we had a rallying cry when all this was happening, that no one would be left behind. So indeed, in the pandemic, we did not let go of anyone in the company or reduce pay. And then when we were touched by COVID, not just us but our communities, we did a good job of safeguarding our people. And then if somebody got ill, we took care of that person without much consideration for cost. In addition to that, what happened was we recorded record profits. In 2020, our profits were 50% higher than pre-pandemic levels. We are able to pay bonuses to our employees, and I'm very proud of that. And they were not expecting the levels of support from the company in this very difficult time. Also, I'm proud to say that through our collective efforts in the management team, we were able to get the board of directors of Nickel Asia to approve the vision that I was mentioning earlier. So that was approved in November 2021. That having that vision really energized the whole system, and I feel now more than ever that there is a clear direction for all of us, not just as individuals, but as teams. And we have clear 2025 targets that are simple, people can relate to, that people contributed to building, and everybody knows where we're going. As the CEO, I feel that I am, more energized than ever before since I joined the company.
What are the challenges you foresee ahead as Nickel Asia transitions further into new ventures, of course, within the space of solar and geothermal?
Well, the challenges for is growth, right? Right now, what I told you that we have a target of 1 gigawatt, which could be upgraded to 3 gigawatts. We currently have 100 megawatts, which will be almost done. We have 68 currently. and then with a view to 200 by next year. So, the challenge is the 800 megawatts that we will need to secure. And I'm fortunately, these are not just plucked out of thin air. We have real discussions, real opportunities that we are looking at, and in advanced stages. That would be the challenge to get these properties and then to develop them. So that's the next challenge, to develop these properties as well as we have developed our current one. And how we will address that, we have a very valuable partnership with a Chinese company who own 10% right now of our solar subsidiary. And with them on hand, I believe that we can deliver a best-in-class solar farm in our developments going forward. So I guess those are the two main challenges. In terms of industry, I feel very good where we stand now, both in terms of the nickel and the power markets. There are tailwinds to both, nickel price and electricity price in the Philippines. So I'm not too worried about that.
Thank you so much for speaking to us.
All right, thank you.
Dennis Zamora, President of Nickel Asia Corporation. I'm Noelle Lim on ASEAN Speaks by Maybank Investment Banking Group.